I love all things education and have been in the field of education for a very long time, which makes me old and makes me uh, enjoy the work even more day to day, especially where we are right now in the field of literacy. I just feel this huge amount of excitement at the potential across classrooms in the United States and elsewhere. What's important to know is that I've been an independent consultant for a long time. 20 years is a really long time to be out of the classroom. And yet it's incredibly important to me that I remain connected to the classroom. So that picture actually is from last week. I was working in remote Alaska in a school in classrooms teaching students. Anything that I provide during professional development are strategies that I've used with students anytime I get into the classroom. So that's really where my heart is working alongside all of you who are doing the hard work. And so that's probably the most important thing to know about me. Today, we are going to focus on enhancing learning through student engagement. This is not necessarily a new topic, right? We always want students to be engaged, highly engaged in the learning that's happening in the classroom. And it might be possible occasionally that you would have students who totally check out or are passive learners in the experience. And what we know from research is that if students take a very passive stance in the learning experience, they are likely not to be learning to the level that we would wish for them. So we are going to spend this time talking about effective strategies to ensure that students are highly engaged and participating in the instruction. I would ask for you, as we work our way through this content, to be reflective on your own current instructional practices. And if you are somebody who is a coach, you support teachers, we may have administrators on today, you may work at a district level position, I would ask for you also to be reflective about what you see happening in classrooms. So here we go. This, as I said, our time together is pretty brief and super, super precious. And so this is how we'll work together. I will provide some content, and then we're going to take some time to practice a bit of the strategies. So I will ask you at certain points in our time together to share in the chat box. And we would love to have 100% participation in the chat box. So if you are on a device that allows you to utilize the chat box, please do that. And then, as I said, just please be reflective on your current practices and look for a few strategies that you may be able to tuck away and use. You could probably answer this in a nanosecond. Why should we pay attention to student engagement? And the saying on the bottom of the screen comes from one of my very favorite people, Anita Archer. And if you are at all familiar with Anita Archer, you know she has some Archerisms that just go along with her. And so she would say that learning is not a spectator sport. When students do take that very passive approach to learning, they have become a spectator. And so our goal is for students to be highly engaged, that they are actually doing things, and we'll talk about what those things might be to show their level of engagement and their level of understanding of the content that's being delivered. Student engagement isn't just about the time in the literacy block. So these strategies are just all day long with students. I want to start here just to kind of ground us in what the research says. And from the field of cognitive neuroscience, Stanislas Dehaene provides us in the field of education information on how the human brain acquires information or knowledge, uses that knowledge, and then transmits that knowledge. And in his work, he highlights the main contributors to successful learning. He calls those the 4 pillars of learning. And again, this is based on cognitive neuroscience. So attention, we need students to attend to the learning. We need students to be actively engaged in the learning. So that's where we're focusing our time today. Students need to receive feedback, and then students need to be able to consolidate their learning. So those 4 pillars of learning have been shown through cognitive neuroscience to be pretty critical for student learning. And when Stanislas Dehaene speaks to active engagement, he's really referring to the brain being attentive, focused, and active. So students are doing things, right? And we'll talk about those things. Additionally, I want to just raise this information, coming from the National Center on Intensive Interventions. And NCII has put this graphic image forward about the elements of fidelity. And fidelity means if we're going to determine if our instruction and our intervention is having an impact on students or not having an impact, that we would need some things to be in place that we could say with confidence students were actually there to receive the instruction, so the exposure and duration. The instruction that they received was of high quality, so explicit and systematic. And one of those elements on the fidelity wheel is that students are engaged. We can't say whether instruction or our intervention is not having an impact if students aren't actually engaged in that instruction and then cognitively doing things. So just wanted you to keep this in mind as well, that our topic of student engagement is not a new topic. However, I really want you to be thinking of it in this light of what is the cognitive neuroscience around it, and how about what it means for the decisions that we make for the students that we serve instruction. We know through research that student engagement, which just goes hand in hand with increased opportunities to respond. If we are engaging students, we are increasing their opportunities to respond and engage with the instruction in some way. We know through research that the result of that is student achievement increases. And by golly, on-task behavior increases. And behavioral challenges demonstrated by some students decreases. When we employ strategies to effectively engage students, we can be sure that these 3 things will be the result of that. I'll have you read what you see on the screen for just a moment. This also comes from Anita Archer. So true, right? Especially in this time of many of you or your districts or your systems or systems across the world are adopting new materials. Many of those are strongly backed by research or evidence if they've been studied. Many of you are experts at your craft of delivering instruction, and yet still, it's possible that students may check out, may not be hanging on your every word. And so in order to make sure that students are with us, we do have to take an extra step of really intentionally designing opportunities for students to respond and engage. So let's talk about some of the most effective strategies for increasing student achievement or student engagement, and then also the opportunities for students to respond. As I talk today, the definitions that I have in mind when I think about engagement are when a student's cognitive effort is focused on processing the content. So cognitively, we are asking them to do something. And then the supporting practices that we'll speak about, we'll practice a few of them today, are evidence-based techniques to really maximize student engagement. These are some tenets I'd like you to keep in mind. Really implement a no opt-out policy. It is not okay for students to opt out. As soon as they opt out, they have checked out and cognitively aren't doing the things that we would wish for them to do to engage with the learning that's being delivered or the teaching that's being delivered. And we know from Stanislas Dehaene, cognitively, students need to be doing something. They need to be processing the information that's coming at them. And so no opting out. And do insist that all students engage in saying things, writing things, and doing things. only call on raised hands after all students have had an opportunity to engage in an opportunity to respond. That's key. And that's really where I'm going to ask you to be reflective. I get the pleasure and the honor of spending time in classrooms across the United States. And by and large, what we default to as teachers many times is the raised hand. It feels good when students raise their hand and want to share their responses. We are drawn to it. Even when we don't want to be drawn to it, we are drawn to the raised hand. And when the student who raises their hand gets called on, it is actually only that student who had the opportunity to respond or to cognitively really do the thing. So I would ask that you really think about limiting students raising their hands to respond to questions. Students can share individual responses after all students have had an opportunity to cognitively do the work. And then just ensuring that all students in the classroom, whether it be in Tier 1 whole group instruction, during small group, or during any intervention system, all students are given many opportunities to respond. The materials that we use for delivering literacy instruction, I'm just going to focus on literacy instruction. The materials that we use don't often say, time out, here's an opportunity for a really strong unison choral response, or take a pause here, here's an opportunity for students to talk to each other about the XYZ, you fill in the blank. So our materials aren't often finding those multiple opportunities for students to respond. So what I'm suggesting today and all the work that we're going to talk about this morning is that it's intentionally designed. It takes effort. It takes work on the part of the person delivering the instruction to ensure that those many, many opportunities to respond are present. So here are the things that we would want students to be doing to show us their understanding or to maximize student engagement. The methods are that we would want students to respond verbally. We would want students to respond in a written format, or we would want students to respond by showing us some action. There are lots of choices on the screen, and it provides lots of options for us in our teacher tool belt to pull any of these forward throughout the instruction to really maximize that student engagement. When we have students respond verbally, here we're thinking about a choral response or a unison choral response. That's when everybody in the class or everybody in the small group would respond at one time. We also would want students to have a think, pair, share, or a partner talk to be able to discuss the text that's being used, the vocabulary words that are being taught, their reactions to the text, and many opportunities for students to talk to their partner. And we would want students to engage in discussions, maybe in groups of 4, that they engage in discussions with their peers about the text that's being read to them or that they are reading themselves. Individual verbal responses also have a place, just no hands. That's what I want you to remember. No raised hands, and that's not our go-to when we're seeking responses from students. Individuals can come after everybody's had a chance to either chorally respond, talk to their partner, or talk with their group, or any other one of those strategies that you see on the screen. A written response might be the use of whiteboards. You all are super familiar with that. I bet there's not a single person on with us today. There are 60 of you now who don't have access to whiteboards. So students can respond by whiteboards and they hold those up and show the teacher. Students can use response cards, and I'll show an example of those in just a little bit. Clicker systems are in use in some classrooms. I haven't had the opportunity to use a clicker system, but it is an option. And then writing frames or sentence frames where students are filling in part of a sentence to show their understanding or demonstrate their learning. And then acting out responses would be that students are going to act out something, perhaps a vocabulary word. They're going to share a gesture. They're going to give a hand signal, thumbs up, thumbs down, hand on top of your head, rub your tummy if. And then the teacher can ask for facial expressions. The goal here is everybody's responding. And that's really about equity, all students responding. If we've really implemented a no opt-out policy, all students should be showing us thumbs up or thumbs down. All students should be ready to respond with a unison choral response. It holds students accountable for participation. No passive learners as much as possible. So let's hold them accountable. If I am seeking a unison choral response and I notice 3 of my students didn't respond, I don't move on. That's also what I want you to kind of take away and take a note about, is that it is okay to hold students accountable for their level of engagement. So often in a unison choral response, I'll put 1 hand up or 2 hands up, and this means think. So I'll pose the question. This means think. When I drop my hands, everybody responds. I might say, Carrie, were you so excited for the virtual symposium today? I want you to think, Carrie, were you so excited for the virtual symposium today? Think. I drop my hands, and I would bet that Carrie's going to say,
yes, I was.
And if I did that whole class and there was a few, 2 or 3, even 1 student who didn't respond, I say, oh, I didn't have everybody. Let's go back. And I pose the question again. And I say, think. And then I drop my hands again. Establishing your signals for maximizing student engagement are really key to the success of them. If I asked the question, I dropped my hands, 5 students didn't respond, and I moved on anyway, guess what message that sent? That message said to those 5 students, it's okay. I didn't need to hear from you because I'm actually going on anyway. And your friends took care of that for you. And that pattern is persistent and hard to break. So it is okay to hold firm. We want equity and we want maximized student engagement. And as I just said on the last screen, it requires intentional planning. You won't be able to lean on your materials much for the opportunities that present themselves to stop and employ one of these strategies. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of the responses. We're going to get really clear about strategies to employ a unison choral response and a partner talk or a think, pair, share. So we're under the column here for verbal responses. And here's a couple of key attributes of when to know which kind of response to seek or elicit. We want a unison choral response when the answer is likely to be short and the same. Okay, so anytime I'm going to ask a question to engage students and it is likely to be short and the same, I can use a unison choral response. It doesn't have to be hands up for think and drop hands. That's just what I tend to use. It can be anything that tells students you're thinking and a signal for them to respond. The unison choral response, a signal for that is key. It could be a snap. It could be, I can't think of anything else, but any kind of a signal that is when they're supposed to respond. So if the answer is short and the same, it's a perfect opportunity for a unison choral response. If the answer is likely to be longer, or students could potentially have different responses, it's a prime opportunity for a partner talk. Knowing those characteristics of those 2 types of responses is going to be really key for the success of employing these strategies. If I'm asking a question that is likely to be longer, or I might hear a few different responses, this is not the right choice, because then it's just kind of a muddled response. So short and the same, unison, long and different, partner talk. Beautiful. Great. Just check in the chat box there. I should have said when we started off, if you have any questions at all, if anything makes sense to you, just be super active in that chat box. We're going to turn there in a moment to engage in a practice, but also just to kind of firm up our community this morning in this session. There are lots of you on today. Use that chat box just to be dynamic. Okay, so unison core response. Here are some more attributes. All students respond together. Super key. There's not blurting, and there is not acceptance of students not responding. So all students respond together. And you just hold firm to that. You can be light and positive and keep a smile on your face, and you just say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear from everybody. Let's try it again with a smile on your face. And if you did it again and there were a few students still not participating, you say, oh, one more time. I need everybody participating with a smile on your face. Don't forget that, with a smile on your face. Think time is really critical for all students to be prepared to answer. That's really key. So a signal that it encourages students to stop and think and cognitively get themselves organized. Some students need 2 seconds for that. Some students need 10 seconds for that. Do provide that think time so that the students feel safe, that they had the chance to get themselves organized, and they are ready to respond with their peers. Some students may be taking a passive stance to learning because they may not be provided with that time to be able to get themselves organized to respond. And then that signal is just so critical so students know when to respond. It can be anything. There just needs to be some signal for students. And if a student were to blurt, I bet you can imagine what I would say. I say, oh, no, we're going to wait till I drop my hands. Let's try it again with a smile on my face. So blurting just took that opportunity away from everybody else. And then that really diminishes the effectiveness of a unison choral response.
Shelby, we've got a good question in the chat from Javier about partner talk with kinders. I think maybe you're going to get to more detail about partner talk coming up.
Yeah, really great question. I hope to be able to give you a few little tidbits. So we have lots of folks from Oregon on today, and actually across the country, who may be implementing enhanced core reading instruction, or ECRI, which are lessons and routines designed to enhance foundational skills lessons in I think almost all the core programs that are out there right now. And so this might look familiar to you if you are an ECRI implementer. And this is really key to not just ECRI, this is just key to eliciting multiple opportunities for students. So the focus would be that if you are asking students to look at something before they're going to respond, you would focus them on that. The focus here is also in a unison core response. My focus is my hands are up. And then you might cue students. So in the case of a foundational skills lesson, you might say letter name, you might say sound, you might say let's blend, all while keeping that focus where students are supposed to be looking. And then offering a think time. Often 2 seconds is plenty for many students. It's not plenty for some students. So just know that 0 think time wouldn't be okay at all. So give a little bit of think time before you actually signal for students to respond. And in the case of foundational skills, we're often tapping, we're sliding, we're looping our hand. And that signal is telling students now is the time to respond for a unison choral response. In the case of vocabulary or comprehension or other areas of day. You may drop your hands, you may snap your fingers, you may tap a table. You may have a little bell that you ring that indicates now is the time to respond. So do think about these 4 steps. Do focus the students in. Do tell them what you are wanting them to respond with. Do give a little bit of time for them to organize themselves cognitively. And then finally signal for that student response. Here's just an example. This is just sounds in isolation. So here students are going to demonstrate their understanding of the phonemes that represent these graphemes. This does come from an ECRI lesson. And I would touch to the left of the grapheme EE. I would say sound. I would wait just 2 seconds and I would tap underneath for all students to respond with E. And then move to the next grapheme. So that's what a unison choral response can look like in foundational skills instruction. Let's take an opportunity now to practice a bit and get a little bit more engaged in the chat box. Let's practice with this piece of text. This is, I just pulled this from ReadWorks. This is identified as a grade 2 piece of text, just an informational or nonfiction piece of text. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to read through this very brief text. And your job is to share one question that you could ask that could elicit a unison choral response. So before you start reading, one question that you could ask where the answer is going to be short and the same. And don't go to the chat box yet. So I'll let you read, cognitively think about your question, and then I'll say ready to share. Okay. So what question might you ask students to elicit a unison choral response? It's likely to be short and the same. And when you are ready, you may share in the chat box. Oh, beautiful job. They're coming in so fast. Do amphibians have backbones? Yes or no, everybody? What animal is an amphibian? Based on the text, everybody think. What kind of animal is an amphibian? So always think about asking the question twice as well. Type of animal is a frog, everybody? Yeah, where do amphibians live? Oh, how many kinds of amphibians are there? Oh, I love that question. Short and the same, right? How many kinds of amphibians are there, everybody? Look at your text if you need to. Think. And then drop hands ready to respond. Beautiful. Where do female frogs lay their eggs? Awesome. And kind of a close sentence. Amphibians live in both land and what, everybody? They live in both land and what? Ready, think, and then a drop of the hands. Can frogs be helpful to humans? Yes or no? Beautiful. I don't think I read this one before. Do amphibians have hair or feathers, everybody? Hair or feathers? And then drop. And you could see all of those questions are grounded right there in the text, right? So we're going to ask the students to, if this was a listening comprehension activity, I'm going to ask them to employ their listening comprehension skills. The text may be up on the screen. We can refer back to it. When I ask the question, I might say, take a look at paragraph 1. That's where your answer is going to be. There's lots of good questions here that we can ask students that just have a very quick, short, and same response. If I chose one student at a time, if I posed the question and said, what happens if amphibian skin dries out? What happens? And I say, Rachel, would you like to tell us what happens? Rachel is the only one cognitively who gets to do the thing. And out of my class of 23, I just said, it's okay. I don't need you to. I don't need to maximize your student engagement. So those are amazing questions for eliciting a response that is a unison choral response. Many of these opportunities for students makes a big difference in their level of participation, their level of excitement about reading and about literacy instruction, and just increases their level of engagement in seconds. Okay, beautiful job with that, everybody. We're gonna move to partner talk, with the key differences here being if the answers are likely to be different or longer. That is not the time to ask for a unison choral response. And so here also, think time is really critical so that students can cognitively organize themselves before we have them turn to a partner and then share a response. Sometimes we jam kids together too quickly and they didn't even actually have a chance to formulate what they were going to say. And so think time is also as critical with a partner response. There also needs to be a signal for who's going to go first in the partner share. And if they are both going to share, then there also needs to be a signal for partner one's going to share first, partner one, be ready, and then listen for me to invite partner two to share. Those kinds of signals and structure to a partner talk are critical because, as you've probably experienced, when we just tell students to talk to their partner, that might be heavy with one student only getting the opportunity to share. It might be if we jam them together too quickly and don't give them think time, they are not actually sharing a really productive response with each other. So think time is really critical. And then each partner has a turn to respond throughout the lesson. It doesn't need to be that partner one and partner two both share on the question, but that the teacher is alternating that so that it's, again, equity for students. And do consider the use of sentence stems. So Javier, this is what I would say would be probably my go-to with kindergarten. In fact, it is my go-to with kindergarten. And by the way, kindergarten terrifies me. I find myself in kindergarten classrooms all the time though, and I walk out and I think, oh, that was amazing. So I'm not sure why after 30 years, I still think it terrifies me. But I will always use sentence stems with kindergarten students so that they are supported in their partner talk. And I am also having a dual benefit of increasing their oral language skills. So sentence stems, and I'll show you a few examples. Partner talk. So the think time would look like this. I might say partner one, you're getting ready to share with partner two something that you learned in that first paragraph. Partner one, you're getting ready to share with partner two something you learned in that first paragraph. That is likely to be a longer, different response. So partner check, partner response is a good strategy. And then I'll say partner one, when you know what you're going to share, give me a thumbs up. And I'm watching. And when most students have a thumbs up, that tells me they indeed are ready to share something productive with their partner. And so then I can say, great, partner one, ready, and share. And then they turn and talk. They turn knee to knee. They look at their partner or sit by their partner or however that is structured. I was in a classroom the other day and there were 4 desks or kids around a table. This happened to be 4 desks. They had shoulder partners and they also had face partners. So you can imagine that was 2 different partners, right? I thought that was really a cool way to mix that up. Partner one, you're going to share with your shoulder partner this time. Partner two, you're going to share with your face partner this time. So some structure to who they're sharing with would be really key as well. 2 things that I want to share with you. You've already heard me say no hands. No hands. We're not going to the raised hand first. We can go to that after we've had everybody engage. The raised hand gives that one student an opportunity to respond. When we use a unison choral response, we are now at 100% participation. And when we utilize a partner talk opportunity, we are now at 50% participation. So as much as possible, I don't want you to drop below 50% when you are looking to maximize your student engagement. Here's just an example of from vocabulary. So just wanted to give a quick example of what it could look like when you are teaching students meaningful words from the text, tier 2 words. You want them to deeply know these words. And it doesn't have to look like this. This is just some PowerPoint slides to demonstrate deep teaching of one vocabulary word. And this was from a first grade classroom. The word was anxious. I really love the word. I want students to deeply know that word and use that word in their speaking and their writing. It's a pretty sophisticated word. And so I delivered some instruction on that word anxious, and I gave them examples. I gave them non-examples. I gave them sort of a schema for the word anxious and some other words that mean about the same thing. And then, and this was kind of beginning of year, it was October of first grade. So kind of beginning of year, first grade. And then their next task was to do something with that vocabulary word. Cognitively do something with it, that they just didn't hear me tell them about the word. I didn't stop at giving them the word meaning, the example, the non-example, then they're actually going to do something with that word. And it's a partner response because responses are likely to be different. And so this is how this would go. I would say, boys and girls, anxious means whatever. Oh, sorry. I'm going to get a unison choral response in there as well. So I might say, everybody, anxious means what? What does anxious mean, everybody? Drop my hands. They would say to be worried. And I would say, okay, partner one, here we go. Partner one, you're going to describe a time when you have been anxious. And you're going to say, I was anxious when, because I was worried. Let me give you an example. I was anxious when I sang at the concert because I was worried. So I give him an example. Partner one, I want you to think, I was anxious when, because I was worried. When were you anxious? Give me a thumbs up when you're ready to share, and you're going to use our words up here. I was anxious when. Give me a thumbs up. And when I see many of them have a thumbs up, I say partner one, turn to partner two, and share. And I'm walking around. That's another thing. It should go without saying, but we are walking around and monitoring the responses. And then I say, everybody back here, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beautiful job, partner one. Here's a few responses that I heard, and I share a few that I heard. And then partner two, now it's your turn. You are going to describe a time you were not anxious. You were not worried about something. And you're going to say, I was not anxious when, because I was not worried. Partner two, I want you to think, give me a thumbs up. So all of the attributes of a strong partner response. With both of them responding, I'm at 100% engagement. With both of them responding, I'm at 100% students using the vocabulary word that I want them to know deeply. I gave them think time. I gave them structure. And I gave them a sentence frame to help them with using the word accurately and productively with their friends. So those sentence stems are pretty, a little bit lengthy, but Javier's question in the chat box, sentence stems can be used at any time during the day and at any length. And they just may be some sentence stems that are just go-tos, they're up on the board. Without sentence stems or frames to frame their thinking, might it be possible that students use it incorrectly, and in this case, vocabulary, get off track, don't actually demonstrate understanding. Might it be possible? If I were asking a unison co-response, you would say, yeah, probably possible. So structure it to the degree necessary for students to be highly successful with it, because we are asking 100% of students to be engaged. All right. So the steps for effective partner response with the goal of increased student achievement are: assign partners, do assign partners, do have a 1 and a 2, or a peanut butter and a jelly, or a shoulder partner and a face partner. Randomly having students turn to the person next to them doesn't work as well as having a structure for who their partner is. And then give the task. Partner 1, you're going to, and let them know exactly what they're going to do. And let them know who is answering first. It may be, if I'm asking a comprehension question related to a text I just read, I may only have partner 1 respond. Partner 2 is going to get a chance on the next page with a different question. So it doesn't always have to be both students responding on the same question. Do monitor pairs as they share. Do walk around. Do listen for responses. If you walk around and many students are highly inaccurate, we have to reteach that, right? We have to cover that again. So that's our formative information. If we walk around and students are killing it and doing a beautiful job with whatever the task is, amazing. And we give them that feedback. Do bring answers back to the whole group. So you might say, oh, I heard a couple of really amazing responses. Let me share a few. Or you might say, Carrie, would you like to share your response so that we can all hear it? It was pretty fantastic. Or I might say, Rachel, your job was to listen to Carrie. Might you tell the class what Carrie said? So Rachel, as a listener, has a job, and she needed to really listen to her partner to be able to share her partner's response. So do take time to actually kind of bring a close to that partner activity. It's super high leverage. You had high percentage of student engagement. Do take some time to bring that to closure and share the amazing learning. And do provide feedback to students. And then just through research, we know some of the attributes of feedback are: the best feedback for students is that it's specific. Carrie, I loved the way I heard you use the word anxious in your sentence to Rachel. Beautiful job, Carrie. So that was specific. I didn't just say, good job, Carrie. I was specific in what I liked about her response. Do have it be positive, genuine, and credible. And do have it be provided for noteworthy performances. If you have a student who is just a little bit shy, they may not be the most actively engaged, and yet you caught them at a moment that they just were amazing, that's noteworthy, and then that's worth providing feedback on. So those are some of the steps for being really providing effective partner responses. It depends, and I see that question in the chat box. It depends in kindergarten. I mean, I'm not going to, I'm going to leave it at that. It depends. They're your students, and if you feel like you get to a place where they could share their partner's response, I would absolutely hold that level of accountability when it presents itself. Maybe the question and the response is not too complex, and that would be a place to start, is when it's not super complex. Being a good listener is part of just being a good student. So not only being the person who shares the response, but being a good listener of that response is also what we want to teach students and provide them feedback on. And yeah, thanks for sharing, Erin. All right, so we're going back to our chat box. Let's think about a partner response. You'll have to think a little harder on this one. The answer to your question is likely to be longer and could be different. So again, I'm going to have you hold it, and then I'll say, let's share. So I'll give you a couple quiet moments to think of your question. All right, partner response. The question that you ask is worthy of being asked and is likely to be longer and maybe different from students. So when you're ready to share, go ahead and share in the chat box. All amazing questions. How can frogs be helpful to humans? And I just read these questions and I can't help but think of a sentence stem that I would provide for students, right? So how can frogs be helpful to humans? It's just in my being. I can hardly read that question without saying partner one. You're going to think about how frogs can be helpful to humans, and you're going to say frogs are helpful to humans because, or frogs are helpful to humans, and then fill in the rest of it. What are some ways that humans can help to make the frog habitats healthy again? Beautiful. And that was a little bit of inference needs to happen for that one. I thought of that question as well, Erin. A little bit of inference would need to happen, or a little discussion about what would need to take place to make the habitat healthy again, if background knowledge was lacking. If there's background knowledge, then students have the ability to share on that topic. What can you tell me about the skin of an amphibian? Good. Describe an amphibian. Yeah, we learned a lot about that in the short piece of text. And if I choose that as a unison choral response, that's going to be a mess when I then signal for a response. Describe 3 characteristics. Ah, nice, Francesca. What happens after an amphibian's eggs hatch? What can cause frogs' habitats to disappear? These are right. These are worthy of being asked, and the students are going to have to do something cognitively to respond to these questions. Beautiful questions. Yeah, and Sonia, if this piece of text is coming at a time where you've been reading about different amphibians or different animals, now you can do some comparing and contrasting, right? How is this frog that we read about today similar to or different? I love that. Yeah, again, habitat healthy again. Javier, good job. Why is it important that a frog's habitat is healthy? Partner A shares first, partner B is listening first, and then we're going to swap that. Beautiful. Thanks for that level of specificity. Characteristics. Yeah, and explain the life cycle. And you might have to do a little bit of pre-teaching there, or perhaps this is perhaps a text in a series of texts on this topic, and they can draw from what they've been learning. And what do frogs need to live on land? Beautiful job, everybody. So just to kind of close that up, when you ask for partners to respond, you've just asked for 50%, at least, at the minimum, 50% of students to cognitively do the thing. And then if you are having them both share on the same question or give the next partner another question, now we're up to 100%. Way better, way better than being drawn to the student who raises their hand as soon as a question is posed. Often the students who raise their hands are the students who don't need the opportunity to cognitively do the thing. So we want to just eliminate that as much as possible as our go-to response. And many of you, I'm guessing, are in your classrooms doing the hard work, or you are supporting teachers who are doing the hard work. And you may not have the lens of being in many classrooms in many different places. And so even with all that we know about reading and all that we know about engaging students, because this is not a new topic, it is still what I see in classroom after classroom after classroom is questions being posed and students raising their hand far more than I see levels of 50% engagement or 100% engagement. Um, yeah. Thanks, Mary, for sharing that. Yep. And writing was one of those options for, we're going to have them do something, right? Cognitively do something. They can verbally share, they can write to share, or they can give an action. So when that student raises their hand, here's a little bit of guidelines. So I said never. That's a pretty strong word. Never. I will say, do call on students when it can relate to a personal experience. So you might say, Carrie was learning about frogs. I knew Carrie was learning about frogs at home. And so, Carrie, I'm going to ask you to just share one thing that you learned. That's a personal experience. That gives Carrie a chance to kind of think about what she's been learning and then share something related to her personal experience. Do not, that's super bossy. I don't ever really use bossy words. A consideration is don't call on hands or volunteers when the answer is the product of instruction or reading. Just don't do it. If you are asking a question and it comes from the instruction or the reading, it is one of those options. It is a verbal response, it is a written response, it is an action response to maximize student engagement. And then you can randomly call on students, randomly yet intentionally. That's the key is, calling sticks are a really great strategy. And they are, I would absolutely use those in my classroom as well. I would just balance that with intentionally calling on students because random checks with the popsicle sticks or calling sticks that may not get me to hear from some of the students that I need to hear from. So random yet intentional. And then here's just an example of response cards. So that was listed as an option. Students can have yes or no cards at their desk, or if there's some structured way to have these available. They can have true or false, agree, disagree, and they're each on, yes is on one side, no is on the other. You can have ABCD cards, and those might be on a ring. And you're going to ask students to show, is the answer A, is the answer B, is the answer C, is the answer D. If you've used response cards, again, you've asked a question, you've used response cards, you are again up to 100% participation. Here's just an example of utilizing a response card with the same piece of text. So I might place a question on my presentation board, which word best describes an amphibian skin? And I'm going to say, I want everybody to think, get your response cards out, everybody think. Don't show me yet. It's right there in the text if you need to look. Take a look. And they're flipping through their response cards, and I say, everybody ready? And show me. And then they all go up at the same time. And students would choose, if they had been listening, they would choose C for their answer for slimy. That's just an example of how to use those response cards. Yeah, Carrie's just really confirming that no hands raised policy and no opt-out policy. So, and that it be school-wide. That's just how we're going to move forward, is no hands raised.
I heard Anita say to a principal, do you have a no raised hands policy in your school? And he said no. And she said, you do tomorrow.
See, and now Anita Archer can get away with being a little bit bossy because we listen to her, right? So that's beautiful. I mean, we pay attention to the research in the field of education, and the research says when students are engaged and have many opportunities to respond, student achievement increases. just that alone is compelling enough to employ a no hands raised policy. It also reduces behaviors. So those two things, I'm in. I'm going to stop right here for just a moment. Let me check where I am. Yeah, I'm going to stop right here for just a moment and just have you share in the chat box something that has been good for you to hear either for the first time, good to hear again. I asked you from the beginning to be reflective on your current practices. So if you would just take a moment and share something related to student engagement that has been good to hear, confirmed what you knew, or a good revisit for you. Oh, the response cards are coming in strong. Yeah, pretty fun. Christy says the no hands raised policy. Yeah, and it's about increased opportunities for students to respond. No hands raised. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful, Francesca. The sort of the defining characteristics of, am I going to ask a unison choral response or am I going to ask a partner response? Yes, and I think it's Andrea, if I'm saying that right. I use the word intentional a few times. Your program materials are not going to say, time out, here's the perfect opportunity to elicit a unison choral response. So it does mean you have to be planful, you have to think ahead, and actually taking notes in the manual is a really good idea. I can't boss that around, but I would say I would highly encourage that. Anytime I model a lesson in the classroom, which seems to be my life lately pretty often, and I'm working with text, I will write out my questions ahead of time, and I'll put a big U to draw my attention to unison choral response. I'll put a big P for a partner share. I just map those out ahead of time. And if I were going to employ response cards, I would note those as well. Yes, more efficient. Yes, beautiful. It does help us to be more efficient, right? We're not calling on multiple hands that are raised. We're not hearing from the kids that we probably didn't necessarily need to hear from only. We're going to be more efficient in our response, in our teaching. Beautiful job. Yeah, the sentence frames, good. I'm glad either that was a reminder or just a good thing to hear is the use of sentence frames to support academic language goes a long way. And even our students who are very verbal and have no problem sharing with their partner benefit from a sentence frame because it may reduce the number of words that they are going to share, which gets them more narrow in their use of whatever we're asking them to use by just narrowing their focus on it. Yeah, the routines and procedures, super tight. Just like we do with foundational skills, we carry those all throughout the day. We carry them into math, we carry them into science, into social studies. Good, no hands raised, good revisit. Great, Kaylin. Yes, beautiful. Now is a good time. You're in an adoption year for your response to intervention. It's a good time to be thinking about strong routines and procedures that have an evidence base behind them. Yes, awesome. The answers, the responses are so great. I can't pull away from the chat box. Thanks for adding again. Oh, hi, Dina. Yes, yes. Those are sometimes the students we don't need to have cognitively do the thing, the kids who are raising their hands or the students who are raising their hands. I want to just share an example. So really beautiful job with that. I want to just share an example in thinking about decodable text, because I'm often in classrooms watching or delivering the lessons, and I find the use of decodable text to be a widely used piece of work in many classrooms now. Particularly, its place is to kind of close the foundational skills lesson, to give students an opportunity to really internalize the sound spellings that we are teaching them. And so the decodable text is often heavily focused on a pattern. This is just an example of a second grade decodable text. There are lots of patterns happening in this text, but it's clear that I probably just initially taught that the OW grapheme says ow. Many times students are, with decodable text, it is either a choral read. Everybody's reading it together, either whole group or in small group, with the teacher kind of leading that choral reading. Or I see what we would call popcorn reading. One student gets a chance to read the first couple sentences, then I move to another student, then I move to another student. I see this more in small group instruction. What I see many times is the teacher reads, then the students read. And I do want to just encourage you to think about flipping that if any of those practices are within your tool belt. And I would like to encourage you to think about a flip to make it more engaging and more effective. Decodable text is typically very hard for teachers to figure out how to have that be an engaging experience for students and effective at the same time. So in this example of Scowl the Owl, I want to encourage you to have a first read for accuracy. And with accuracy, all students, 100%, whether that be in whole group or small group, would be responding at the same time. And we would give them think time to be able to do the work cognitively, read the word in their head, get ready to read that word out loud so that they can respond with their friends. So think about the tenets of a unison choral response. What that would look like is I would say, finger under that first word, think. I want you to read it in your head. When you hear me tap, you're going to read that word out loud. So I gave them think time, I gave them a signal, I gave them a structure. And that read for accuracy is to make sure that students, when I release them to build their smoothness in reading, that they are actually being released and with the ability to read accurately. So just employ the tenets of a unison choral response with that. Have some think time, have a signal, all students read the word at the same time. And that's typically a little bit of a slow read because we're focused on doing the work in your cognitively of reading that word. And then I want you to immediately go back in and build smoothness, not fluency, not reading fast, but the ability to read smoothly. And that is typically best done in a very short section. That is very different than how many might be using decodable text. Becoming smooth only occurs after a few reads of the same material. That's just backed in the research. Rereading is the strongest way to build fluency. And so we might read for accuracy that first paragraph. And then I say to students, now your job is to go back to the top, put your finger under the word the, and you're going to read that paragraph, whisper read it to yourself. If you get to the end, they sit outside the town hall. If you get to that sentence and you haven't heard me say stop yet, you go back and whisper read it again and again and again until you hear me say stop. That multiple whisper reads, everybody's engaged, everybody's reading at their own pace, multiple times in a very short section is how students get smooth. And then we go, let's read the second paragraph now, and you move on. All with the goal of all students cognitively doing the thing required to become a more efficient and effective reader. We are down to our last minute and a half. And I'm just going to check the chat box really quickly. I want to say to the 60 or so folks that have been on this morning, thank you so much. Thanks for joining this topic. Thanks, even though it's not a new topic. Thank you so much for your engagement in the chat box and sharing with each other. I could see some emojis, some reactions happening, some likes of comments and loves of comments. So I hope that this session was beneficial for you, just to be reminded of strategies that are effective. no hands raised. I want you to seek 50% or 100% as often as possible so that students are cognitively doing the work that we want them to do. Carrie, any last words that need to be said?
Thank you so much, Shelby. This was a great session. I knew it would be. There's a couple things in the chat, a link to a form for us to kind of monitor how we're doing at Oregon RTI. Hope you enjoyed the session, and you'll be entered for a prize drawing if you fill out the form. And then there's also a link in the chat to back to the conference program so that you can choose if you're going to another session, which one you want to go to. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, everybody. I wish you a really wonderful afternoon, rest of the session.
Thank you, Shelby.
Yeah.